Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
First service ran a little long with our extra music and communion and everything today, so thanks for your patience as we gather together. Welcome to our session 10 of our study on Revelation. We're getting to the really good stuff now. This is the best part of the story. It's where history is headed with the new heavens and the new earth, where all is made new. So hopefully you grabbed one of the handouts over there. If you missed any of our previous sessions, they're all sitting over there, as well as the big poster from the Bible Project as well. So today we're going to be talking about the new heavens and the new earth. So how have you normally heard or seen heaven described or pictured in art or comics or books or movies?
Clouds.
Clouds. What else?
Streets are paved with gold.
Golden streets.
Honey
Yep.
streaming down.
Fluffy angels.
Honey streaming down. Fluffy angels.
Angels with wings.
Yeah. Little cherub kind of. Harps. Yep. Harps.
Random fruits flying
Saint
around.
Peter over at the gates. Yeah, like here's a thing that says here's Saint Peter saying, his all dogs go to heaven policy really tests my faith. The dog's eating his book of who's supposed to get in, who's not supposed to. And the dog's even left something behind over there. And he calls in saying, mop to the front, please. Mop to the front. Or you hear, everything is perfect. You're welcomed by friends and family. What else?
Well, I something about they have separate rooms because some denominations don't believe that others do.
Yeah.
They have separate rooms for it.
Yeah, on the other side of the
Who's
wall.
that over
Yeah.
there? In that other building. Oh, that's
Yeah.
the Baptists. Or whatever. Or that's the Missouri
we
Synod
all-
Lutherans.
we always heard it was Missouri Synod.
Yeah, the Missouri Synod was on one side, we were on the other side.
When God says He's going to prepare a room for us,
Uh-huh.
I've often wondered, does that mean He's going to decorate it the way we would like to have it decorated?
Yeah. So, is it going to be everything to our own personal tastes? Will
Yes,
that
but-
not matter?
Luxury.
Yes, but when he shows you around, he says, don't make any noise because they think they're the only ones up here. They don't make noise.
I think it was Billy Graham said, "Oh, someday I'm going to be driving a Cadillac down those golden streets." Well, that's maybe not quite what is really described here in Revelation. So let's take a look at and read what actually John has in his vision. Will somebody read the first 8 verses of chapter 21? Who'd like to read?
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Now I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. Also there was no more sea. Then I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adored for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and He will dwell with them, and they shall be His people. God Himself will be with them and be their God. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. There shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away. Then He who sat on the throne, there's also supposed to be thrones in heaven,
Mm-hmm.
and said, Behold, I make all things new. And He said to me, Write, for these words are true and faithful. And He said to me, It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give the fountain of the water of life freely to him who thirsts. He who overcomes shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he shall be my son. How far did you say?
One more verse.
Okay. But the cowardly, unbelievingly, abominable, murderous, sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death.
All right. So what do you notice that's different about John's description of the new heaven and earth compared to our popular ideas about heaven?
Says it's coming down to earth. A new-
Yes,
a new-
yeah, that heaven comes here. The New Jerusalem comes down. Yep.
So like, if it comes down, but like,
Mhm.
what happens when like we individually die?
Yep. So Jesus said to the thief on the cross, "Today you will be with me in paradise."
Okay.
But that's different
Yeah,
than.
what, Hawaii?
I think your
Yeah,
soul.
it's more
your
than
soul
Hawaii.
moves right away.
Yeah,
My
so
soul goes to Hawaii, okay.
who you are is with God.
Yeah,
That's really about all we know.
right.
You
Your
know,
soul goes
is-
to heaven,
is-
and then your body will meet together, right?
So
Yeah.
yeah, so that's the amazing thing is that it's we think about life after death as being, you know, with God up in in heaven, but resurrection is something different and later. Yeah.
So was it like when we die, we go to heaven and all
Mhm.
the souls that have passed on get like a big party with the souls, not the bodies, but the souls, and then like and then someday it comes back down, and then we're like poof back in different bodies.
We're given new bodies.
Right.
We're gonna
be
given new
reunited,
bodies. Yeah, yeah.
reunited.
So is it gonna be like that
Glorified
kind of?
bodies. What's that?
Is it like that kind of?
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. So there's a new heavens and a new earth, and they're reunited. And it's, you know, it says in that first verse, the first heaven, the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. Now, you know, we think, what? The new heaven will have, or the new earth will have no ocean? But you have to think about what the sea meant to people back then. Sure, it was a place that they would go on boats to go trade and that sort of thing, but it was restless, it was dangerous. Lots of people who went out on ships, you know, they didn't have weather forecasts. Storms could sweep in quickly off of the Mediterranean, and it was a treacherous, unknown, scary place. Nobody had been, you know, diving down below to see the amazing creatures there or anything like that. So the sea was like this powerful, dangerous place. So he's saying, no more dangerous storms and that kind of thing.
You see that on the earth though too, with the fires and the earthquakes and
Sure.
storms.
Yep. So this is going to be a totally different mode of existence that won't have all of that danger and destruction and difficulty. And as you read, I saw the holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. So this is the New Jerusalem is Christ's bride. That Jesus, you know, God dwells with us here on earth, and everything is made new. And then there's the water of life, and the destruction of evil and all evildoers. Let's go on. The next few verses here. Somebody read 9 through 21.
One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls full of the 7 last plagues came and said to me, "Come and I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb." And he carried me away in the spirit to a mountain great and high, and showed me the holy city, Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God. It shone with the glory of God, and the brilliance was that of a very precious jewel, like a jasper, clear as a crystal. I had a great high wall with 12 gates, and with the 12 angels at the gates. On the gates were written the names of the 12 tribes of Israel. They were 3 gates on the east, 3 on the north, 3 on the south, 3 on the west. The wall of the city had 12 foundations, and on them were the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. The angel who had talked with me had a measuring rod of gold to measure the city, its gates and the walls. The city was laid out like a square as long as it was wide. He measured the city with the rod and found it to be 12,000 stands in length and as wide and high as it is long. The angel measured the wall using the human measurement, and it was 104 cubits thick. The wall was made of jasper, and the city of pure gold, as pure as glass. The foundations of the city walls were decorated with every kind of precious stone. The first foundation was jasper, the second sapphire, the third agate, the fourth emerald, the fifth onyx, the sixth ruby, the seventh trilite, the eighth beryl, the ninth topaz, the 10th turquoise, the 11th jacinth, and the 12th amethyst. The gates were 12 pearls. The 12 gates were 12 pearls. Each gate was made of a single pearl. The great street of the city was gold and as pure as transparent glass.
Wow. So, what do you find significant or intriguing in this description of the New Jerusalem?
Things are really rich.
Yeah, it's resplendent.
Mhm.
Yeah. Made with, it's like all made out of precious jewels and gold that is as clear as glass. What else?
I wanna know how large this is.
Okay. Yeah. We'll get to that in just a minute. It's huge.
Has like
It's
probably trillions
huge.
people, you know.
Uh-huh. What else do you find interesting about that description?
It's high, it's wide.
Yes, isn't that interesting?
So
It's
giant
like
box.
cube shaped.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And what is it shining with?
Jewels.
It's got all these gems and
Yeah.
gold and jewels and so forth, but it's coming down out of heaven from God, and its radiance is like a rare jewel and so forth. And we find out a little bit later that its light is God and the Lamb. So there's kind of this, as I've mentioned before, so much of Revelation has all these allusions. It alludes to different passages in the Old Testament, and it's like all those prophecies, all those promises are being fulfilled bigger and grander and more amazing than we could have originally imagined. Flip over on the back side of your handout and take a look at this. These are a whole bunch of quotations from Isaiah and from Ezekiel and their fulfillment. Who wants to read the column on the left? We'll kind of go back and forth. Somebody read the column on the left, and then the other person read the column on the right. You'll do that, and
I'll do the right.
okay. So go ahead with the first one. We'll go back and forth.
Should I read where it come to? Is that it?
No, we can all see that.
For I am about to create new heavens and a new earth. The former things shall not be remembered or come to mind.
Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more.
I am about to create Jerusalem as a joy and its people as a delight.
And read that second one too.
He has clothed me with the garments of salvation. He has covered me with the robe of righteousness. As a bridegroom decks himself with a garland, and as a bride adorns herself with jewels.
And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband.
My dwelling place shall be with them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people.
See, the dwelling of God is among people. He will dwell with them as their God, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them.
I will rejoice in Jerusalem. No more shall the sound of weeping be heard in it, or the cry of distress.
He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no
Do not remember the former things, or consider the things of old. I am about to do a new thing.
And the one who was seated on the throne said, See, I make all things new. Also he said, Write this, for these words are trustworthy and true.
I am the first and the last. Besides me there is no God.
Then he said to me, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end.
Oh, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters, and you that have no money, come, buy and eat.
To the thirsty I will give water as a gift from the spring of the water of life.
So you can see all the way through there, all these different yeses to God's promises. Revelation never directly quotes the Old Testament, but it continually shows how God is faithful to his promises, but he is free to fulfill them in unexpected ways. It's not this kind of mechanistic notion of prophecy and fulfillment that a lot of people tend to have. You know, they think, well, it says this, so this is going to happen. Well, God is free to make things even more amazing than we thought. And that's what we're seeing all the way through Revelation. So to get back to the New Jerusalem and its dimensions, so it says that it's, as you pointed out, it's 12,000 stadia, which was the circumference of a Roman stadium. So 12,000 stadia is essentially equal to 1,500 miles. And it's described as being that, 12,000 stadia wide, 12,000 stadia long, and what? 12,000 stadia high. So somebody made like a scale model of that and put it on the globe. And it looks like this. So it basically would cover all of the Middle East. Or
But is that literally the entire heaven?
or if we put it on the United States, it basically goes from here to diagonally down to New Mexico.
And California.
Yeah. And then it's that high. It extends 1,500 miles into space. Now, how would that work? Our atmosphere doesn't go that high. What would that do to the rotation of the planet? So the question is this literal? Is it going to actually look like that? Or is there symbolism here? Is it bigger and richer than just a cube that's going to come down on Earth?
Like that's like a really big area,
Mhm.
but when I'm thinking about like all the faithful people,
Yes.
it's like how can they all fit in that?
Right. Well, it's really
Yeah, but
huge.
I mean,
So
it's huge.
here's the deal. Here's the deal. The way that it's described, it's not so much talking about the quantity of city space, how much square footage are we all going to have. It's more about the quality of life in God's presence. There's the description in Ezekiel of where it says, let's see, I got that right here in this book by my professor who taught this class that I learned all this stuff from. He says that the New Jerusalem's holiness and perfection is expressed in its shape, which is a perfect cube, 12,000 stadia on each side. Now, the point of the description does not seem to be a precise indication of the quantity of city space in eternity, but an indication of the quality of life there. Ezekiel, too, saw a vision of a restored Jerusalem in which God's glory would be manifest and rivers of water would flow from the sanctuary. But in his vision, the city, with its 12 gates, measured only a little bit more than 1.5 miles on each side. John speaks of a new Jerusalem that will be 1,000 times greater than this in every direction. So that's 1,000,000,000 times greater than Ezekiel's vision, affirming that God will both keep and surpass the promises that were made through the prophets. It's really interesting how that the shape of it, being a cube, that would have reminded people of the Holy of Holies in the sanctuary, in the temple, which was cube shaped.
That actually makes sense because a cube, like a square has 4 sides, and that's like the humanly number.
Okay.
And
And this is making it
yeah.
3 times that. Yep.
Uh-huh.
Yep. So, what do you remember about the Holy of Holies in the temple?
Once a year, the priest went in.
Yeah, the only person that could go in was the high priest, and that was only 1 day a year that he could go in there. And when he walked in, he was wearing, on his turban was inscribed God's name. And on his breastplate were 12 jewels that had the names of the 12 tribes of Israel on it. What did we just hear about this description of the New Jerusalem?
12 gates.
12 gates, and on them are written the names of the 12 tribes. And they're all made out of one giant pearl. And how big of an oyster would you need to have for that? And it has 12 foundations that are all these different gemstones. And what are they named for?
Would each tribe be sticking together as that certain tribe?
Well,
Or
I don't. It doesn't
are they all-
specifically say that. It just
No, it
says that
doesn't.
the 12 gates are the 12
Different.
names of the tribes, and the 12 foundations are the 12 apostles. So the priest was the high priest was the only one who could go into the Holy of Holies. This Holy of Holies is thousands of times more magnificent, bigger, resplendent, and it's designed in such a way that anyone can enter. The gates are never shut. We see that in just a little bit further down. So it's the whole city is really more descriptive of a community, that the whole community is holy. You know, it's more descriptive of the people of God than of a place. So what were you going to say?
Yeah, yet it says, you think, what was it, big enough for everybody?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, it says also, not because you're calling out Lord, Lord, if you'll get there.
Right. Right.
And it says the path, the road is very narrow.
And few are the
So,
ones who take
exactly.
it. Yeah.
So you might
Doesn't
not
it
have
say
as
in the
many as you
Bible
think
it's
there.
easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than
Right.
it is to heaven?
Mm-hmm.
That's the key.
Yep. Yep. So it's not so much describing literal dimensions as it's pointing toward how much bigger, how much grander the will be the fulfillment of the promises.
They'll
Well,
be,
you've
they'll be
also-
perfect.
You
Yeah.
also pointed out that all of this is images that would mean something to the
Right.
people. So based
Absolutely.
on the size you showed, they didn't realize the world was as big as it is.
Right.
And that size basically is everything they know.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole area.
Huge. Yep.
The whole area that they knew was
Right.
New Jerusalem.
Right. Yeah.
That's true. That's a good one. That's a
Yep.
good one.
Yeah.
So let's go on and read the last few verses. Who wants to read verses 22 to 27?
I saw no temple in the city, for the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are its temple. And the city has no need of sun or moon, for the glory of God illuminates the city, and the Lamb is its light. The nations will walk in its light, and the kings of the world will enter the city in all their glory. Its gates will never be closed at the end of the day, because there is no night there. And all the nations will bring their glory and honor into the city. Nothing evil will be allowed to enter, nor anyone who practices shameful idolatry and dishonesty, but only those whose names are written in the Lamb's Book of Life.
Yeah, so what do you notice here?
The light is from God.
Yes. Yep.
There's not gonna be any night.
Yeah. No night. You know, because what did night kind of represent to people back then?
Fear and
Fear and
darkness. You can't see. You don't know what's coming. You know, and here you're illuminated by God and the Lamb. Nothing to fear.
It's surprising when it says, though, that the kings of the world can enter the city.
Yes, yeah. The people, you know, all of the people of the world, the kings of the earth will bring their glory into
Probably
the New
godly
Jerusalem.
kings. Godly kings.
Yep.
There's a-
Right, because
says
it
that.
specifically says nothing unclean or unholy will ever enter it, but you know, nor anyone who does what is detestable or false. Only those who are written in the Lamb's Book of Life, which we'd heard about in the previous chapter. Yeah. So, yeah, the gates are never shut. No night. The nations will walk by its light. They'll bring their splendor into it. One of my favorite writers and theologians is N.T. Wright. He has written massive theological books on, you know, just digging into the Gospels and all sorts of it, and you know, Paul's letters and so forth. Brilliant New Testament scholar. But he has also written a whole bunch of books that are very accessible and easy to read and just really get you thinking. And this one is called Surprised by Hope: Rethinking Heaven, the Resurrection, and the Mission of the Church. It's taking a really close look at what Scripture says and how sometimes it's not what we think it says. And sometimes our ideas about heaven and resurrection and what the church is here for aren't really what's in Scripture.
Nice crop on each side.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. The fields are ripe unto harvest. So, what he says in here is the ultimate destination is not going to heaven when you die, but being bodily raised into the transformed, glorious likeness of Jesus Christ. Resurrection isn't life after death, it's life after death. You know, like you pointed out, Cassidy, you know, when we die, we go to be with the Lord. But then the New Jerusalem comes here, and everyone is raised from the dead. And all those written in the Lamb's Book of Life are in this amazing presence of God. He says, Jesus is not saving souls for a disembodied eternity, but rescuing people from the corruption and decay of the world, of the way the world presently is, so that they can enjoy already in the present that renewal of creation, which is God's ultimate purpose, so that they can thus become colleagues and partners in that larger project. It's like heaven is coming here, and we get to be part of the renewal of all things right now in the way that we live our lives. You know, so we know where history is headed, and we get to be part of making that happen in our own lives.
When was this judgment done in the Lamb's Book of Life? When did he judge
Ah.
before?
So you remember back in chapter 20 here, and a couple of places. Let's see. Another book was opened, the Book of Life. Oh yes, and actually that had been mentioned earlier in Revelation as well. I think it was Revelation 15.
one that starts with verse 11.
Verse 11. Yeah. I saw the great white throne and so forth, but I'm looking for another spot. I think this was in 7. Or was it 5?
Hard to comprehend, all we know is it's gonna be perfect.
Right.
There's some that must know, we can't go in there.
Yeah.
They won't let-
So I'm not finding it right now, but it says that those who were written in the Lamb's Book of Life before the foundation of the world. So long before
He knew
we were even
we
born.
were gonna
Well, then
come.
we're
Yeah,
prejudged.
God knows
He knows
ahead of
what
time
you're gonna do.
Yeah, yep. So that's kind of a relief of, oh, it's not up to me.
You just gotta leave it to faith and
Mhm, mhm.
you know it's gonna be perfect.
Yep.
If you try to figure out each item, you're gonna get lost.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Is it possible that, by the time, you know, we've got the 12 gates, and no one can enter, you know, if they're unclean, that judgment's already been placed, and they're not even there.
Yeah.
Right,
You know,
No.
so it's
right.
not
Mhm.
that they're held out, but people that are there.
Yeah.
Are judged.
So, another resource that I highly recommend, I think we're running out of time, so we're not gonna be able to, or no, wait, no, we've got time, it's only 10:30. I wanna show you this video from the Bible Project on heaven and earth. We have watched it, before in this class, but, maybe some of you weren't here for it, or maybe you've forgotten what it talked about. But this does a wonderful job of talking about how heaven and earth, the new heaven and the new earth, are a lot like how God created things in the beginning. It's like Eden being restored. So let's watch this together.
So in the Bible, the ideas of heaven and earth are ways of talking about God's space and our space.
So I understand our space really well. We live here, there's trees, rivers, mountains. But my understanding of God's space gets a little fuzzy.
And what we do get in the Bible are images trying to help us grasp God's space, which is basically inconceivable to us.
So these are two very different types of spaces.
Yes, they're different in their nature, but here's what's really interesting is that in the Bible, these are not always separate spaces. So think of heaven and earth as like different dimensions that can overlap in the same exact space.
So we talk a lot about going to heaven after we die, but this idea of heaven and earth overlapping, we don't talk a lot about that.
Which is kind of crazy because the union of heaven and earth is what the story of the Bible is all about. How they were once fully united and then driven apart, and about how God is bringing them back together once again.
So let's go back to the beginning, where heaven and earth, they're completely overlapping.
Yeah, this is what the Bible's description of the Garden of Eden is all about. It's a place where God and humanity dwelt together, perfectly no separation, and humans then partner with God in building a flourishing, beautiful world and so on.
But as humans, we wanted to do things a different way. We wanted God out, and we wanted to create a world apart from Him.
Yeah, so we have these two spaces now, and the Bible actually uses lots of different kinds of words and phrases to refer to these two spaces to make a clear distinction.
So you said that these spaces can overlap, though. So explain how that works.
Yeah, this is where we have to start talking about temples. Because in the biblical world, you experience God's presence by going to a temple. That's where heaven and earth overlap.
Now, there are two types of temples described in the Bible. One is a tabernacle, basically a tent that was built by Moses. And the other was this massive building made by Solomon.
And these temples were decorated with fruit trees and flowers and images of angels and all kinds of gold and jewels and so on. And these are designed to make you feel like you're going back to the garden. And at the center of the temple was a place called the Holy of Holies, which was like the hot spot of God's presence.
Now we can go and be with God again.
But not so fast, because the temple also creates a problem. So God's space is full of his presence and goodness and justice and beauty, but human space is full of sin and injustice and the ugliness that results.
So how do these spaces overlap if they're so different and they're in conflict with each other?
This was resolved through animal sacrifice.
Yeah, that's kind of weird. What do animal sacrifices have to do with this?
Yeah, the idea is this. Animal sacrifices, somehow they absorb the sin when the animal dies in your place. And it creates a clean space, so to speak, where you are now free to enter into the temple and be in God's presence.
Okay, so if I'm an Israelite and I live in Jerusalem, I might be able to be in God's presence. But you said the story of the Bible is all of heaven and earth reunited.
Right, so we have to keep going in the story where we come to Jesus in the New Testament. And in the Gospel of John, we hear this claim that God became human in Jesus and made his dwelling among us. Now this word dwelling is really curious. It means he set up a tabernacle among us. And so what John is claiming right here is that Jesus is a temple. He is now the place where heaven and earth overlap.
What's interesting about Jesus is that he isn't staying in this safe, clean space. He's running around hanging out with sinners. He's healing people of their sicknesses and forgiving people of their sins.
He's basically creating little pockets of heaven where people can be in God's presence, but he's doing it out there in the middle of the world of sin and death.
And he keeps telling everyone that the kingdom of heaven is at hand.
And he even told his followers to pray regularly that God's kingdom come and that his will be done here on earth just as it is in heaven.
But a lot of people are threatened by Jesus and they kill him, which seems to spoil this whole plan to reunite heaven and earth.
But we have to go back to a scene earlier on in Jesus' story where John the Baptist saw Jesus and said, "Behold, this is the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world."
So Jesus isn't just talked about as being a temple, he's also talked about as being the temple sacrifice.
Yeah, so the cross is now the place where Jesus absorbed sin to create a clean space that is not limited like animal sacrifices. Jesus' sacrifice has the power to keep spreading and reuniting more and more heaven and earth.
And this is all really great, but it leaves one big question in my mind, which is, what happens when I die? Don't I just fly over to God's space to be with Jesus?
Yeah, so a few times in the New Testament we learn that Christians will be with Jesus in heaven after they die, but that is not the focus of the Bible story. The focus is on how heaven and earth are being reunited through Jesus and will be completely brought together one day when he returns. So in the book of Revelation we get this beautiful image of the Garden of Eden, now in the form of a city, coming to end the age of sin and death by redeeming all of human history in a renewed creation. And God's space and human space completely overlap once again.
What did you find helpful or thought-provoking in that video?
I like talking about how they're not two separate places, how they overlap.
Yep. And where or when did it do they overlap?
Right now.
Yep, right now.
When Jesus
How?
died for our
He died on the
sins.
cross.
Yes, I love that it talked about how Jesus is, in his ministry, everywhere he was going, he was healing people, he was forgiving their sins, he was casting out evil, spirits, and announcing that God's kingdom is at hand, it's coming, it's right on the edge of being here. So he was invading our sinful, broken world with the power and love and purity of God, and carving out spaces in people's lives and in the world where heaven's kingdom, heaven's reign was happening right there. And he calls us to do the same thing, to announce forgiveness to people, to pray for healing, to work to make people's lives better so more and more pockets of God's presence happen all around the world. That's what he called us to pray for, was thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. Right here. And that's what we're looking forward to, is the complete fulfillment of that. What else did you find really interesting in the video?
Comparing it back to Eden, to the Garden of Eden.
Yeah. What was helpful about that?
Well, just thinking back, that was when heaven and God dwelled with human, and it's just basically a matter of restoring that.
Right. I've heard it said that the Bible, if you take sin out of the Bible, you basically are left with the first 2 chapters of Genesis, the Garden of Eden, and the last 2 chapters of Revelation. All the rest is how God is dealing with the mess we've made of this world. But this is where history is headed, is back to where it was in the beginning, but even more grand. The first 2 chapters, it's this beautiful garden where everything is at peace and in harmony, and God lives with his people and puts them in charge of tending the garden. And then at the end, it's a garden city that comes down from God, and his people are given more responsibility. And it talks about, we'll read next week, or in 2 weeks, about the tree of life and how its leaves are for the healing of the nations. We'll be given more things to do, which we've talked about, and we'll talk about in worship today. So Jesus comes to reunite heaven and earth. What else was there? Something else that stuck out for you from the video? Yeah.
The one thing that I thought of when we started talking about it, when God creates all things new, all the rules that we associated with matter and everything all else, he's making everything new. It's a whole new ballgame. Everything flies out the window.
Right. Yeah. Everything is new and better. And there's no more brokenness, pain, sorrow, anything like that. Trap?
I find it kind of nice how Jesus was like that purple bingo blotter all over the simple world.
Yeah, bringing God's space into ours, right in the midst of all of our sin. And that's what we're called to do too, as his ambassadors. You can think of it, Paul talks about us being citizens of heaven. And that, to be a citizen back then meant that you belonged to Rome, or whatever, where you were from, but you lived in Philadelphia or in Laodicea or where whatever other town, but you were a Roman citizen, and so you acted like you were living in the city, in the capital city, in your town, because an embassy. What do you know about the actual grounds of the embassy in another country?
The wall around it.
Yep, there's a wall around it. And what is, what's that?
A gate.
Yeah, and the gate.
Security.
Right, security and so forth. But it's a safe spot. It's a sanctuary that the land of that embassy, so say our embassy in China, you walk into that embassy and you are standing on U.S. soil. That is, belongs to our country, even though it's in another country. Paul is talking, and so The Bible talks about us being ambassadors for Christ. Like, we are the embassy. We bring the presence of God with us to the people in the world around us.
So when you're talking about like the embassy is like it's actually the United States as part of
Mhm.
China.
Right.
So was that kind of like, I'm just trying to think history here, like with the Berlin Wall, it was like Western Germany, and that was like owned by USA and all those people, and then like there was the Soviets that owned the other part, but then
Right.
in the middle of the Soviet part of Berlin was split.
Right.
And so that was that.
Yeah,
part of that, and that
so
was
Western Berlin was surrounded by Eastern Germany,
Mhm.
but West Berlin was a safe place.
No, yeah, West Berlin.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it was like that,
Yeah,
kind of.
like that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So they had walls then too, still. do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's God's desire that none should be lost. From
Yes.
the beginning,
Yep.
was everybody's name in the book of life for those who refuse to accept Christ?
Yeah. Yeah.
The name's there, but they're not gonna be
So-
saved
so-
if they reject.
Yep. God ultimately lets us experience what we want. If our desire is to be with Him, you know,
Gives us
our
a
names
choice.
are in the book of life. If we live our lives in such a way that, you know, betray our heart, that shows that we are bent against God and want no part of Him and in His presence, then He will allow us to experience that. You know?
Like when we were born, we're in that book, and then, almost like the Garden of Eden, when we were thrown out of the garden, Adam and Eve.
Huh?
You never hear anything more in the Bible about the Garden of Eden until Revelation.
Oh, but you do all over the place.
Is
Like
it
the
the same part?
the description of
I mean the Garden of Eden.
so like the temple, for example, the whole temple grounds and the all the decorations in there are of fruit trees and pomegranates and
Describing the
the
garden.
angels and so forth. It's all describing, echoing the garden. You know, that's the holy place. You know, and that's what God is going to turn the entire world into in the new creation.
I think almost that God is letting us have just a little tiny glimpse of what it could be like, even
Mhm.
for the fact that when we leave the earth and we go into space, there's no time.
Exactly.
And I had a professor once that said, for example, our parents who died 100 years ago, grandparents many hundred years ago, when we leave, say, die, the time stops because
Mhm.
eternity is outside of this world.
Right.
So
Yep.
as progresses, our world progresses, God's letting us see a little bit of that, what it's like
Mhm.
when there's no time.
He gives us glimpses
Because
of
we only
His
figure by
presence all the
hours,
time.
by the moon and the sun and all that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I've always found that very interesting.
Mm. Neat. So Jesus is this, you know, new temple. He's the bridge between heaven and earth. He's the victorious Lamb. God intends to reunite His space, His dimension, and ours. And so the end of Revelation points to the fulfillment of those promises, the new creation where all is made new. And Paul talks about this in Colossians chapter 1. Starting with verse 15, he says, Christ is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by Him all things were created, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things were created through Him and for Him. And He is before all things, and in Him all things hold together. And He is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in everything He might be preeminent. For in Him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through Him to reconcile to Himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of his cross. So he's talking about the new creation, where everything is made new and set right. And it's way bigger and more amazing than even the prophets could imagine. Well, no class next week. Happy Thanksgiving. And we will pick up again on December 3rd, where we will look at the last chapters, or read Revelation 22, where you'll find that the end is not an event, but a person. The person of Jesus. So, and then on the 10th, we will have, we will experience Revelation, the whole book, in one sweep with readings and songs, because so much of Revelation is in our hymns and liturgy and so forth. So it's going to be a wonderful experience with Tim playing and accompanying us as we sing together. We read and sing Revelation with familiar songs. Have a great week, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you.